Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Thielen with Aspen Film. Thank you for joining us for the number 2 in our series of Filmmaker Talkbacks here at the Red Onion. I'd like to express our great appreciation to the Red Onion staff for welcoming us, and for those of you as you're listening for the next hour to our Filmmaker guests, you have an opportunity. You can order lunch, and the Red Onion has graciously extended a 10% discount. So we hope you can enjoy some food while you enjoy some food for the mind. I'd like to turn the proceedings over to today's moderator, who is Landi from KQED Television in San Francisco. KQED is one of Aspen Shortsfest sponsors, and we're particularly excited because Lisa is the series producer for Film School Shorts. And there's buttons and cards on your table where you can learn more. So I'm just going to turn it over to Lisa. Thank you so much.
Hello, thanks everyone for coming out. I'd love to just jump right into today's discussion and have each of the filmmakers introduce themselves, their films, and tell us a little bit about what inspired you to either make or contribute to the project.
My name is Ludovic. Littee. I'm the cinematographer for Sweep, which showed last night. And then I don't know. And then you were talking about just the contributions that we saw for the project. I mean, it's
yes, or more specifically, what inspired you to get involved?
Well, I mean, it didn't take much of inspiration from me because Spencer Gillis, who's the director for Sweep, we did a short called Gun a couple years back, and also we've known each other for almost 6 or 7 years. We've been working in the film business together, so it didn't take much of a
much coaxing.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of we have come together and we just went out and did it, and that's so yeah.
Okay.
Hey everybody, I'm Greg Kwedar. I was the writer-director of Dakota, which played last night as well. And it's been a long journey actually to the short, and it was kind of circuitous. I was always planning to make a feature film about United States Border Patrol through a lot of work I had done on the border. Found my way into the topic and just found it this fascinating world of our nation's largest law enforcement agency that we know very little about, and much less the people who actually do the job. And so we found our way to the short film as a way to kind of explore some of the ideas and themes as we were on that path to a feature.
Does it work? It does, yes. Hello, my name is André Hörmann. I'm here with 2 documentary shorts. One was shown last night, Bhavini, I Only Want to Dance. It's about a little girl from Bombay that really likes to become a dancer. And then the other one is going to be screened on Saturday. It's Andrew with Great Fanfare about a guy, a little 11-year-old boy who wants to become a drum major to lead his marching band to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. What inspired me to do this? I'm a little bit lucky. There are like 2 TV channels in Germany that have special short film TV slots, and they kind of focus on children's portraits. And until I screw up, they tend to hire me. So until now, I didn't, and so I try to come up with new topics every year, with new stories every year, and I spent, I don't know, in the last 10 years I spent like I was in India like every year a couple of times, and I was really often in Bombay, and I have my network there, and I know this, so it was very. I really wanted to work with a kid from there, and started researching and met around 40 kids, and then I ended up with this girl that was very passionate about her goal to become a dancer. This is why I really liked her so much. And the other one was because I was the last year I spent in Chicago doing a long feature documentary, and then I watched a lot of Treme, the TV show and I really loved it. So I always wanted to go there and do something with the music there and Mardi Gras, and so I ended up with this great boy.
And do you find generally that you were drawn to children for this series that had creative aspirations, or is it more all over the map? Any compelling character that you come across?
I think it's more about the aspiration itself, not about. I mean, I did one about a little Buddhist monk at one time, and then another one on a car mechanic from Bombay slums. So it's not about the art.
Okay,
It's more about the aspiration.
great.
I'm Reinaldo Marcus Green. I'm the writer-director of Stop. I'm born and raised in New York City, and stop and frisk is sort of a controversial policy in New York and something that, I basically grew up with and wanted to make a film about it.
Okay, great. Welcome to you all. So all of the narratives deal very much with race and class, but they all also deal with the criminalization of marijuana. And us, all three of them. So I was hoping that each of you could just speak a little bit about why that was something you included in your narrative. Do what you can, DP.
Yeah. I think it's not only about. I think marijuana was just a small part of the film.
Absolutely, I would say that all three of them. That's
right,
the case.
Yeah, it is
because
definitely
it's present in
right.
each.
It is a definitely ongoing theme, and it depends. I guess if you screen the film in California or here, I guess it has a different meaning than if you screen it in if you screen it in Jersey or New York. But I think it's drugs is such a it's such a big aspect to where we are in our society, and how there's so much money being made on both sides on stopping it and also producing it, that I think it just gave us a good viable option to use to tell this story about this close encounter and how it can go wrong, and how this one person has a decision to make based on what they just went through. And that's pretty much what it was used for, and that's and it served its a good purpose in a way for that, but also to talk about a bigger subject and a bigger topic.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. In doing research, we did several years of research into Border Patrol. And something that I found interesting with a conversation I had with an agent was just like, he's like, look, I don't have a problem with the drug themselves, but the current method of the way the drugs are getting in America, he pulled out his phone, he started pulling through photos of, things he had, dead bodies and people he had, caught, and the lifestyle that it was funding, and the kingpins and everything else. Is like, this is what it's funding though, and that's the problem that I have. And I'm a guy on the front lines who does a job and follows orders, but I don't mind busting up the cartels. That's probably the one thing I really derive any sort of meaning from in my job. The migrants that are crossing and coming looking for work, that takes a toll on agents actually, and it's a very humanly complex thing. But when it comes to the drug aspect, I don't think they're thinking about policy. They're just thinking about the kind of people who are profiting off of it currently, the way it's set up in America. But
No Mariana.
Yeah, I think similarly that the drugs are just a way to talk about a bigger issue in my film. I think had you be walking down the street, someone that looked like you and with a little bit of marijuana, I think it would be a different movie. And I think that's the kind of movie I wanted to make, to talk about that. And would that make a difference, whether you're white, black, Chinese, and does it? And so that's how we use it on my film.
And Greg, if we could jump back to you, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what it is that has drawn you to the border. And I read just one line about the feature that if you could tell us where that stands, it sounds really interesting. The take is a little different. So
Yeah.
Is that something still in the works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll start with what first drew me to the border, and it was really how I became a filmmaker, is directly in line with this film particularly. I'd for 3 years, had been doing work on the border in Nuevo Laredo, taking college students to an orphanage, and there's a community called Las Colonias, which is, they're all throughout the southern border, and it's basically communities that are missing basic necessities for human life: water, electricity, etc. And it's on our side of the border, actually. And so we would do a lot of work in these communities and basically just try and open up the minds of the college students that we took to see if we could catalyze something in their own lives out of what they saw, and then also benefit the communities we worked in. And invariably, you do enough trips that I did probably 40 trips to Mexico in the course of the time that I was running that nonprofit. And every time you go through these checkpoints, and I've seen some weird things at checkpoints in the middle of the night. You know, Nuevo Laredo is one of our main entry points in the U.S. You got Juarez, El Paso, you've got Tijuana, San Diego, and you've got Nuevo Laredo. And in the middle of the night, about 12 at night, is a 2-hour wait to cross over on the bridge. And we're waiting in our car, and I see 3 teenagers just walk up the middle of this road. And suddenly I see them hop on the side of the bridge, and they're shimmying along the bridge. And then they drop over on the other side, go through a hole in the fence, and they're into the U.S. And I was like, this is one of the 3 most heavily guarded entry points in the U.S. And 3 teenagers as casual, as just walking down the street in Aspen, jump and cross our border. And I've also heard stories of an elephant in a San Diego zoo that went missing and showed up in Mexico as Benny El Elefantino, and had been walked across our border without anyone knowing it. And so all these things just fascinated me. But as a feature, I was really interested in using and kind of elevating the thriller genre, because I thought it was this way to really focus primarily on 3 Border Patrol agents who are all partners or in the same unit. They're manning a remote desert checkpoint, and an average car comes across their checkpoint that reveals an insidious plot within their own ranks and challenges their relationships over the course of one shift. And so that's actually, we're starting June 1st with production.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
we were funded and starting that kind of crazy journey. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And then jumping back to Sweep, I guess I first just want to say that I really appreciated how candid the filmmaker and writer was in terms of sharing what it was that inspired him to write that story. And it kind of generally made me rethink that narrative as almost like a fantasy of a misconnection, Right. And I wish I had time to rewatch it. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit if that was something that you tried to capture in the way it was shot. And then specifically, I would love, it seems like the jury is kind of out in terms of whether James at the end actually had any, no one wanted to see James throw his new friend under the bus, but did he really have any power in that situation? It's kind of, the jury's out. I want to know what the camera thought.
Well, I'll start with that, because
Okay.
it's an interesting. It's hard for a camera to judge someone's decision, because.
Mm-hmm. But you had mentioned that you had a different approach with each of the characters, so I was curious, where.
Right. It's just when he's sitting there at the end, and he has that choice where he could, agree with the officer and leave, or stand by his friends. And he kind of, there's this self-preservation that comes along where he decides to save himself in hopes that, and just wash it away, and he walks away from it, and that's it. And they'll never see each other ever again. But for me, from a camera's perspective, I just wanted to sit there and watch this decision making. And even though when you watch him leave, and we go with him when he leaves, and then you cut back and you see the reaction of that decision with his newfound friends, and it's just this letdown. It's like, well, I thought we had something. I thought we had something bigger than what just went down, and now all of a sudden, when it's time to prove yourself, you run away. And I think that's just letting it play out. I think, as from my camera perspective, just letting that play out is the important part, and just watching it. And not getting too much involved in dictating, having the camera dictate the character's decision making, I think is very important for me. and that was something that we set out to make. And also you see throughout the film this perspective of the camera too. We have a lot of wonders and these. You just sit down and you watch these people talk and get to know one another without the camera ever saying this is more important than that. Just both these people are as important to one another at this particular moment, and when the time comes where they have to make that decision, the camera then at that point just decides, you know what, I'm just gonna let it just be what it is and not get too much involved. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Absolutely.
I think that was our approach, and even from the beginning of the movie, you start with James, and little below you introduce these other characters, and then they start sharing the screen time, and then when it comes down, we leave James again because he goes to the bathroom, and then we continue our journey with these two new characters that we just met, and then we find they're themselves in an ordeal that they can't seem to get out of, and James, who's the only person who could probably get them out of that, decides that he's not going to be part of it. I think it was a great way, and I think Spencer did a good job of ending it that way because it's nice to. I think that's just the way that I think honestly that's the way most people would handle that situation. I think there's very few people, we all want to be that person who's going to help, and who's going to stick by and say no, this is not. I was also not even implementing myself, but just say no, I didn't say anything. No, these guys they were just out here. We didn't do anything wrong, and that would have been that. But I think that most people, I think as human beings we have an idea of that flight and fight situation. I think most people always fly. That's just who we are. I mean, it's in all of us. Unfortunately, it's sad, but it's true.
Okay. Interesting. So actually, I'm going to ask just one more follow-up question.
Sure.
Your bio says that you boast of your pragmatic approach, and what did you mean by that? Just in terms of your work.
Like pragmatic, like where my inspiration comes from. I mean,
Oh no,
it's
just
like,
it was in your bio, and
I'm trying to. I mean, it's just. It's kind of pragmatic approach. I mean,
well, think about it. And
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's being pragmatic is also making sure that you tell the story the right way, and making sure that the decisions you make based on the story, but that you never want the camera also to take away from the story either. You want it to have a nice balance in your stories, and it's just. I've always said like a good story will always save bad cinematography, but good cinematography will never save a bad story. And so it's just kind of you have to understand that, and you have to understand that there's a bigger piece to it. It's not just about the cinematography, but it's not also just about the script or the acting. Everything has to work as a whole. And every time you decide to do something with your camera, it affects your story. Whether you push in or you pull out, or you let it sit, or you go handheld, or you do Steadicam, or you do static. All that affects what you're trying to portray in your overall story, and that's you have to think about that. You have to think about your theme and how your theme portrays with your camera work, and I think that's what I mean by being just being smart about that.
okay, great, thank you. All right, and as everyone knows, shorts are often a labor of love. So I wanted to start with you, André, and hear a little bit about how. So you're also a professor. You teach as well, right?
No professor.
No, but you teach.
But I teach, yes.
So if you could tell us a little bit about how you balance your personal work, your teaching, and then if you're up for it, maybe you could share the topic of your dissertation.
Oh, damn it.
You have an out.
Okay. As I had to understand, at some point, I won't be able to buy a Porsche or something with documentary filmmaking. No, I won't be able to provide a proper living for my family and stuff. So, and it's a lot of risk in documentary or in filmmaking in general, but in documentary filmmaking especially, because you never know how the projects turn out, and there's a huge competition everywhere, and you never know when you get your next project green lighted, whatever. So I try to figure out different ways of money making.
Yeah. Sure.
So and I was really happy to be able to teach as well, because it's film related, and I always think that it's I very much felt that as soon as I had to, teach what I know and reflect my own work and try to tell my students what I do, I learn a lot about my mistakes and how I can improve and stuff. So and the whole work with the students is really nice to, to talk about their projects and try to find ways to make them better and stuff. So it's I feel it's very much related, and the dissertation, it's a long story. It's actually it's on Bollywood cinema.
Okay.
And it's about the theory of transmitting emotions from the screen to the audience. There is the very ancient theory that's very much connected to modern emotion theories and media theories. So it's and I try to prove that this ancient theory of emotion transmitting is still, because it was invented for theater and dance. I try to prove that it's still in the modern Bollywood movies, and try to find ways to compare it with Aristoteles' way of storytelling, like the Western way of storytelling and how that works. So it's interesting, but it's hard work, and but I have to get it done.
I'll be asking for more at the happy hour, so if anyone wants to join me to know more about the dissertation. So I'm not sure how we are on time, so I do want to turn it to the audience for a while and see if there are questions. Okay, thank you. No questions? Okay. So I'm going to steal a question. Yesterday, someone asked about how the film and its script, that basically a film exists in 3 different forms: the way it's written, the way it's shot, the way it's edited. So Ray, I'd like to start with you because you kind of touched on workshopping with some of your famous friends at the Q&A last night. So I'd love to just hear more about really how you had initially envisioned it with the VO, how it changed in both the shooting and the editing, and then what, if anything, you would change now that it's done.
Famous friends. I paid a lot for those famous
Oh, I know,
friends,
I know. You picked good ones, though. Those are
$50,000 a year to go to NYU. But so the original idea of the story was that that what would happen to me if I was walking home at night. That was like the concept. I came home, I told my wife, I got this great idea. She was like, cool, great. And I was like, well, we'd have this voiceover over it. And she was like, sounds interesting and cool. Let's just see how it plays out. So I wrote the script and I wrote the voiceover over it. And it was a parent talking to a son as the situation was happening. That was how I originally conceived it. And then I brought it to school. Todd Solans is one of my teachers who I paid a lot of money to hang out with and get good feedback. And he's a really smart guy. And he said, this is a really interesting idea. You should, make a narrative, make a beginning, a middle, and an end. And right now you have the middle. We just need the beginning. And, what are the stakes? And so I thought, what would the stakes be? I was an athlete when I was growing up, and how can I put that into the film? So I played baseball all through college and had 2 major league tryouts, and I didn't work. That's why I'm making film, because my fastball just wasn't fast enough. But bringing back to that, we spent several months on the script, basically just talking about it through class and sharing those kind of stories, and then we shot pretty much what I wrote. We shot it. We had some liberty with the police officers in the film because they are New York City police officers, and I asked them how would they typically do a stop and frisk, and so they just walked me through the behavior. And there were a couple things that they didn't feel so comfortable saying, so we just kind of revised the script a little bit there. But there were a few lines that we had to hit, and they did. And then in the editing, it was pretty simple because we have not a lot of coverage. We shot it in a way that was going to be very simple in the editing room. Literally, we edited the film in one night. So that's the way we shot it, so that it would be very simple that way. The last take in the film is one single shot, so there was nothing to do with that. The hardest part was the police officer scene, but yeah, the editor basically put that together, and we were like, that works. Like, and we did not touch it. I think the first half was the trickiest part was really just, you know, getting the tuning with that and sort of setting the stakes, and it worked. So that's how we sort of wrote in all three stages of the film.
Okay. And can you just tell us a little bit more about the workshopping, everything from how big of a class you were in and how much input was given? Just kind of give us a sense of what it feels like in that classroom.
Okay, so Todd Solondz, if you don't know him, is a pretty famous indie director, and he's done a lot of great movies. Happiness being probably one of his biggest movies, and Welcome to the Dollhouse. You might know those films. And the class is a select class, so you have to sort of test into his class. So I did well enough on a short last year that kind of got me into his class, and that was cool. And so there was maybe 8 or 9 students in the entire class. So very small class. Todd, you know, you have one script and you workshop that for the entire class. So you read the script out loud. All the students give you feedback, what they think about your script. And then Todd gives you his 2 cents, and he's usually right. So you kind of, you know, it's feedback from anybody, and you have to listen with both ears and hear people, but you kind of have your idea on what you want to do. So you know, you're always balancing feedback from students and teachers. The biggest note, which I don't think we brought up, was that they wanted to see the drugs before he gets stopped in the film. And Todd also, that was his biggest note, that he wanted to see that. So I had to go against my teacher's advice in that sense, that I didn't agree for my particular film. That wasn't the kind of film that I wanted to make. So I was listening, and I hear him, and it would be another movie. It would be a movie that he wanted to make, but that wasn't the story that I was going for. So yeah, all in all, you know, that was the biggest note in the class, that they wanted to see the drugs before he gets stopped, and in the end, I just went my own way.
Okay. And you did mention in the Q&A last night that you didn't really have a lot of equipment, and it was just, a $500 lens rental. So when you now go to make your feature, I guess I'd just like to get a sense of NYU's involvement in terms of resources that are provided and feedback and any kind of workshopping that'll be done on the feature script.
Yeah, so, well, now that I'm a thesis student, I don't have that interaction with my teachers anymore. I don't have class time to actually workshop the script, so I have to go out and sort of get advisement. So they offer advisement to thesis students. You can sign up for an hour with a teacher, but I'm kind of at that point where, you know, I'm on my own now, and I'm kind of advising myself. I'm lucky to have a brother who's a filmmaker, so we work very closely. And I think at the point that I feel like I should share something, that I probably would share it with 1 or 2 professors that I value their opinion, and I think that I can gain something from. I'm also a little weird about feedback, and some people need 100 people, and for me that doesn't work, and that's not, you know. So I think you can get as much feedback as you want. I'm a pretty hard self-critic, so I'm pretty hard on myself in terms of how I do that. But as far as the feature film and the school supporting you, they do provide equipment, so you get, I think, 14 days of using access to the equipment at NYU in order to do your thesis. So most people will do a short film in 14 days, but there have been some success stories for feature films that have come out of the program. The most current one being Cronies. It was a film that was at Sundance this year, and I think they shot it in like 11 or 12 days in St. Louis, and it looks great, got into Sundance, and so you have these stories. So I am planning to make a feature, and whether I shoot it in 12 days or use a part of that, you know, of the school package in order to do that, you do get insurance through the university. So, you know, the total package can come out to be a little over $100,000 when you think about the equipment, the access to post-production facilities, the access to, you know, some of the university professors and the advisement that you can get. So yeah, I feel like somehow I can make a very, you know, affordable feature, you know, through the use of, you know, through the faculty and by using, you know, the school equipment. So yeah.
Okay, great. And back to Ludovic. I really enjoyed this little bit of insight your producer provided in terms of how you all work together as a group. Can you just tell us a little bit more, because your team has also contributed to some pretty impressive features and collaborated collaborated with some great filmmakers. So can you tell us just how you came together, a little bit about your company, how you came to come up with the name, and give us a sense of what it's like for your team to work together?
I mean, we've been working together for quite a while. We also all came up as camera assistants in the filmmaking world. We worked on movies like Shame and Blue Valentine and A Place Beyond the Pines. And it allowed us to work with some really great filmmakers like Darren St. France and Steve McQueen, and also with Sean Bobbitt, who's a phenomenal cinematographer. And so it allowed us to kind of see how they do it, and also even better is to see how other directors or cinematographers that didn't do it very well. And so you learn from the good and from the bad, and that allowed us to kind of come out with probably one of the best film schools that you can ever do, is just watching other people do it. And that was, it's one way of doing a journey. I mean, it's been a long journey for us. I mean, I've been in the business since 2001 as a camera assistant for 10 years, and then as an operator, and now I'm finally get to shoot. But that allowed us also to, we talked a lot too, because we were working together. We were on set a lot, and we talked a lot about, if we come up with ideas, or this would be a great short, how we would go about it. And you're in the process of making a film with other filmmakers, that the ideas start to flow. And that's one of the degrees in what being at film festivals is you meet other filmmakers, and you start having ideas, and you start bouncing one off one another, and that's how it started. And then we're like, you know what? Why don't we start doing something? Like, why don't we take these ideas and let's do it? I mean, we're surrounded by filmmakers all the time, and we have access to equipment, and we have access to talent, and let's do it. I mean, why not? Like, it's not that difficult when you really start putting your mind to it. And so we decided to form a little group together, and Spencer came up with a short called Gun, and that was our first collaboration. And we thought the idea while we were shooting A Place Beyond the Pines, and then we thought of ways to doing it, and the best way of doing it, and then we just went out and did it, and that kind of started it, and we started building on, and we came up with the idea for 235 because we're just because we're camera geeks, and we love the idea of shooting everything in widescreen, and widescreen is, even though one day I want to shoot a movie in 4:3, but that's another conversation. Okay. But I think widescreen is just an amazing way to tell a story, and so and based on that, because we're all about story, and we want to tackle really interesting stories, we decided to call it 235, and that's where the company name came from. But give us a little bit.
And did you go to film school? Can you tell us about your background?
Yeah, I mean, I did. I started off as a bio major, which didn't work out very well. No one told me you have to work really hard when you're a bio major.
Film's a cinch.
And right, film's a cinch. So I studied communication in college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I went out and I started working for VH1 for a little bit. I worked for VH1 for about 3 months, and I realized it was just too corporate for me, even though you can wear whatever you want at VH1. But it's just, and then my brother got a job at a rental house called Handheld Films in New York City, and they needed people to work there, and I was out of a job, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go work and learn about cameras, and that kind of like introduced me to camera assistants and DPs, and a lot of DPs that I met at Handheld, and eventually did student films with them as a focus puller, I still worked with today. And so, we've had 11, 12 years together, which has been an amazing run, and building, just building collaborations, and also just ideas and learning throughout those years. So that's kind of like my background a little bit. Yeah.
Another opportunity for people to ask questions.
No, thank you. Oh,
do you want to repeat? He asked about Ray's decision to use actual NYPD.
I definitely wanted actors that could play the part, and they just so happen to be aspiring actors. One of the guys is now on the show Gotham. I haven't seen the show, but he got picked up right after our short, which was great. And the other guy had been in a couple of short films, really trying to transition out of the NYPD. This is what they do in their spare time. So they had a lot of passion, and I know them via social media, and I see them sharing their links, and I'm like, they'd be interesting to call in. And I know they're police officers, so the thought was they're going to be as real as anybody because they do this every day, and they didn't have a problem doing it because this is actually their job. This is what they do. And so when I asked them to perform the duty, they sort of did it flawlessly. It wasn't an issue. They didn't feel like they were doing anything wrong. So they were sort of being themselves on camera and having an opportunity to be in a film. So for me, it was an opportunity to keep it real, keep it authentic, knowing that these guys wanted to be actors, so it was a platform for them and sort of a win-win for me. They brought, they told me, oh, this is how we dress when we're not in uniform. So they brought the coats, and this is how we would do the checkpoint, or, oh, I'd have a flashlight and I'd do that. So they brought a lot to the actual characters, where I had sort of some static police officers, and I had, okay, police officer, what I know of a police officer, which is my own stereotype. So I was like, okay, well, I need to move beyond that and do my research by bringing in sort of that police officer. For me, it was a research process that just sort of unfolded on screen as well. We didn't have time to cast like that, so we just, for me, it was the only way to make it real, and I think it panned out that way. So.
And did either of them share with you their thoughts about stop and frisk?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing when you do talk to a police officer. So it's, I do want to maintain my friendship. So we try not to go too far into some of that stuff. And these are guys that face lots of issues on a daily basis. And so, I understand them. I understand their plight. And I think they understand mine as well. And I think there was a mutual understanding that this is an issue that needed to be dealt with. Otherwise, I don't think they would have done the film. I think they both recognize that this is something that police need to recognize, that it can be a problem, but they also recognize that they have a tough job to do, and this is what they're asked to do. This is not their mandate. This is the New York this is NYPD's mandate, and this is what they're tasked with doing. So it was actually interesting for me to see that process. Like, this is not just them just going out sort of doing what they just want to do, although there are certain people that take that leap and take that liberty to cross the line, but this is their job every day. So it was interesting for me to see that, to listen, and as a black male in New York City, and try to understand, why do I feel like a victim all the time, and try to get into the psyche of that. So I think it just kind of worked out that way.
Please.
Yeah, I think it's since been outlawed in New York, but they call it something else. They may not necessarily call it stop and frisk, and I think that's the larger issue, that it's not necessarily the name. This is just something that happens all the time for minorities. I find that when I go to the airport, maybe not in Aspen, but that my pat downs are a little longer than others, or my searches are a little longer, and I find that just common. It's a pretty common thing to be stopped by a police officer. Lots of my friends of color, it's just a normal thing. The way I casted the film, when I brought Keyshawn, who had never acted before, he said to me, we were just talking about the role, and he was like, oh yeah, this happened to me last week. But he just said it so nonchalantly. It wasn't a big deal, like, oh man, this police officer. He was just, yeah, I got stopped and searched last week. Like, no, he wasn't doing anything. He was just walking home, and the police just stopped him for no apparent reason other than he might have looked like he did something wrong. So yeah, as far as the policy, it has since dissipated in New York, but it is still largely an issue that's being looked at. Yeah.
So I guess I again just want to ask, so why did you decide to include the end scene with the marijuana, since it is about arbitrarily profiling, essentially?
Well, to me, it's not about the drugs. I don't think marijuana is clearly in the state of Colorado, it's legal. It's not a big deal, and lots of people smoke it for a number of reasons, whether it's medicinal purposes or just to enjoy a little light snack at the end of the night. I don't know. I don't smoke personally, so I don't know. But to me, it was like, it's just something that other people might consider it to be a not so good thing. And that if he was caught with this small little thing, that his entire life could have been upended. So for me, it was important to show what he could have lost had the stop gone wrong, or very wrong in that sense. So to me, it was important to show that dynamic a little bit, and also it questions the audience: is he right? Is he wrong? Were the police right in stopping him? He did have something, so there's a little bit of that reaction as well. And I think it's important to look at both sides of that. But to me, it's not about the drugs. It's about, they didn't know whether he had drugs or not. They thought he might have, and they stopped him. So, but why did they think he had drugs is the question, and it's up to you whether you think it's right or not that he should have been stopped. So that's why I included the drugs.
Did everyone hear? Okay.
Yeah, I'm jumping into that right now. So it's interesting. We went on a weird journey with our feature. We've done 3 page 1 rewrites with the same 3 agents, but different vehicles that drove the story. And the idea to do a short film was kind of late in the game. And to me, what I was interested in is I came from a documentary background, so as a producer too. And I had started out right when I got out of school doing short films, narrative, directing. And it had been, the last doc I did took 5 years of my life. It was a 7-year production, pretty much exclusively working on that. So it had been a while since I'd been in the director's chair. So I was eager to just get out and explore creatively, see how I had matured from when I had first started out. Even though I hadn't been in the director's chair, I'd been watching a lot of directors work, and I think a producer, when they're working at their best, is a director's most trusted advisor, albeit submitting ultimately to the director's kind of creative vision. You're there to help them stand by their ideas, hold them to it sometimes when it gets bad. But in your back of your mind, if your goal is to be a director, you're going through your own process of how would I have made that decision, and you see it play out sometimes for good or for worse. So I wanted to get back in the director's chair before doing a feature, which I would advise. It was called Rising from Ashes. It was about Rwanda's first national cycling team. Actually played here at Aspen Film Fest a couple years ago. But I think to distill a feature film down, what we ended up doing is we took a character from the feature, and in the feature he actually begins as the villain. He was turned by the cartel under great duress, and that gets revealed in the feature. But I wanted to kind of see him sometime before that happened. And could I find just a simple idea to express, in this very vast, complicated world? If I had 10 minutes, we chose to go with just a very simple idea: 2 guys in the desert on either side of this conflict. That the hope was, over the course of 10 minutes, you would forget that he was a Border Patrol agent and this kid was a drug mule, and you would see them connect on a human level, and then this radio would just sort of shock us all out of what was happening there, and he had to contend again with his responsibilities and his duties on the job. That was the first seed of a film. And then I also wanted to just showcase I get really into the just technical aspects of the job of Border Patrol. How do they search a vehicle? And just the mechanical process of their job, and just kind of turning off the human side. And then also I was very interested in what does an agent do when they're bored on the job and no one is watching them. And I just kind of place myself in his shoes. And I've heard a lot of agents who just, I'll just climb up onto a rock outcrop. I'll pull out my Kindle Fire and have a little cup of tea, and I'll just watch what's happening, beneath me. And that to me was the empathy that the audience needs to access a very polarizing job that people fall on very different sides of. So those were sort of simple things I wanted to get it to try that'll express themselves in much more layered performances and action in the feature, but I thought we could accomplish in the medium of short film.
Now, I understand you're also developing a second feature. Can you tell us a little bit about that and tell us whether or not you expect to first make a short with that project?
Another feature. So I'm producing a feature doc right now that's about slavery in the fishing industry in Thailand.
Oh, it's a doc. Okay.
Told through great escape stories. So men who escaped off the boats and their sort of thrilling tales. But it definitely, something I'm interested in is someone who crosses over from narrative to doc, and the way the medium has evolved. You're seeing so many more, I would call cinematic tools employed with doc filmmaking. The lines are getting blurred between recreations and, even just verite stuff that unfolds, but it feels like, am I watching a movie or am I watching a documentary? And so I think in doing the crossover stuff, something I'm interested in from a career standpoint is finding docs and developing them and seeing them made as documentaries and then adapting those documentaries into feature films. I think it's this way to, at least from the way the industry is working, we have our literary properties and our comic book franchises are kind of run into the ground, and studios are less willing to make bets on original content. But I feel like if you could take true stories as documentaries, prove them as documentaries, and you have a platform to stand on to adapt it into a feature. And so our documentary Rising from Ashes, we're actually adapting into a narrative feature. And I think the Ghost Fleet, the doc I'm doing in Thailand, actually has that potential too.
And did you have a question? Dan?
Yes. This is a question Ray already answered, but for the others, how long was your first cut, and what did you lose between that and the final cut?
For some reason, I always start. I don't have long cuts. I always start out shorter for some reason. I don't know why. It was always like I try to extend step by step. So I think the first cut might have been 13 minutes, and now it's 15. So that's not very spectacular.
For me, it was, I think, a 17 minutes first cut and 11 as a final cut. And ours was actually, we had shot another ending that kind of played out longer, but to me it felt like 3 endings to the short, rather than just kind of picking this moment that I felt more truthful than the ending we had shot, and just kind of using it as a way out to kind of leave it a little bit more ambivalent in such a charged environment that I didn't want to lean too much that everything's going to be peachy and work out. And actually, if I were to write the next scene, even though we never shot it, he would go to the mechanic shop. I don't know if you saw the short, and this kid wouldn't have showed up. He would have gone back out to where he let him go, tracked him to a dead body. But yeah, that's a little dark, but I think it was probably maybe how it would have actually shaken out. That he tried to do the way the law did it for many times, and this kid had been picked up and sent back 10 times in a row. He tried something different, and that also isn't as simple as we hope it would be.
I can't even. I don't even know how long the first cut was, and I know we definitely did. We cut it down a little bit, but not by much. But I do want to touch base because I think your question kind of talks a little bit about the question you asked before, whether what you start with and then what you end with, how your film changes. And I think that every film will change. I don't think no filmmaker ever sets out with a script and then that's the film they end up coming up with. There's so many factors that come into play. And for us, even when we were shooting, we never planned to have a major snowstorm in the middle of our shoot. And so that completely changed the whole dynamic of our short. And now, all of a sudden, the recycling center, which was a character, which all of our locations are always, we always try to make our locations characters. now had even a whole other level to it. And so now like what we set out to was now what we ended up with. What we ended up with was even better. And it's all these little mistakes, or not even mistakes, but these little things that happen that you didn't plan for, that change your script, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse as well. I mean, it goes both ways. And then again, when you get into your editing process will change. You know, you may see yourself liking one character than another, and how you pick, how you cut will end up changing your script and not end up being what you started with. So, I mean, that's the beauty of making films, is the journey of the process of how, of what you find, and you yourself are going through the journey as well as with your scripts, and you're figuring things out, and that's the fun of it. That's why we make films.
That's a good question. I think almost like Spencer's film, you know, it's like that self-preservation. I would put 3 up there, and like, which one has to go? You know, you have to really, really know like yourself. I guess that's the reality. You have to really know, and think about what's current for you today. I mean, what's relevant, and why do you want to make films, and what do you want to say? Do you have, you know, what do you want to say? What do your films mean? Who do you want to attract? Who's your audience? And then drive everything towards that decision. I mean, I have some fun stuff and comedy that I will one day make, but right now is not the time for me. And it's interesting because I had written a feature that's a feature-length comedy, and it's really interesting because I've made 2 shorts now that are dramas, and now I'm getting attention for the drama, and people want the drama. So I could defy that and say, you know, I'm going to make this comedy and do that. But I think I've gotten enough advice and enough advisors that are saying, you're onto something. You should, you know, listen to your voice. You're developing something here, and so that's all part of the process. Is, you know, also talk to the people that you trust in your life and ask them what they think. I mean, if you have a brother, mom, sister, whoever, to say, what do you think? I mean, they're going to tell you. They're going to be the ones that are really honest with you and say, yeah, I don't think so. That's like your, you know, save that for the weekend or for the home camera or whatever. We'll do that together. But this one, I think, this one will survive. This one has a chance of survival, and find your passion. I mean, you have to be like, you're going to spend 2 or 3 or 4 years of your life with this thing that you want. It's marriage. You're giving birth, I like to say, to something, and it will breathe on forever, long past, you know, when you're gone. And that's the beautiful thing about film, is that it will be out there forever to have your name on it, and it's something that you should be proud of for a long time. So I think you really have just to set the bar, the vetting process for your own work and what you want to see out there displayed. Whether it turns out good or bad, it doesn't matter, because you yourself are going to be happy with that particular product. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's a hard decision, but I think you have to really like dig deep inside yourself and say, is this something that I want out there, and what do I want to say with it?
I'll just add to that real quick, and just that I wish I could make more films that I could just make one in a year and it would be over. And I think my process would change a little bit in terms of my decision making, but the ones I've been involved in have been like 5+ years each so far. And so there does have to be that conviction. And I think it's different for documentary and for narrative, because documentary, like you probably know intimately, is you don't know how it's going to turn out, but if you're looking at a project, it's got so many different scenarios that the ball could roll to, that each ending would be interesting, you know, and worth following, and that your curiosity is there. And I'm a big, the process and the adventure of discovery of making the film is really what I hold on to and take into the next project. I love this interaction that happens, but it's very brief. And what you have is the people you make the film with, the story itself that you're following, and and that alone is worth it. And so usually I'm thinking of who am I working with, what is that story that I get to chase and travel down, and even with narrative, that usually involves a lot of real, characters, stories, worlds that I'm just very curious to uncover and travel to. So that drives a lot of my decision.
Please.
We used it's a camera called an Alexa, which is made by Arri, and we shot with old MK2 primes, which were used by Panavision. So we mixed a little bit of the Panavision and the Arri to kind of create the world. And then in terms of funding, I mean, that's the kind of trick, huh? I mean, that's what we all are learning at this point, and just trying to find how we can fund our projects. Most of our projects were funded by ourselves. We save the money, and then we do campaigns to try to run for post and to help us finish the projects through our sound design, our color, and of course funding our travels to come and show at festivals and to be here. So and that's kind of like the route that we've done on all our projects, and now we're talking about doing a different route and exploring different ways of doing that.
We shot on the Canon C300 with Canon CP2 primes. I definitely trusted my DP on that, and I was interested, and I'd seen Blue Ruin was a film that was shot on the Canon C300, and blue is the warmest color, and I just appreciated what the camera brought it, and the flexibility that we were in a harsh environment in the desert with a lot of wind and dust, and that was certainly a challenge. And we shot the film for $10,000. And that was one of the biggest expenses, was getting everyone out to the high desert in West Texas. To drive any place in Texas, you're asking for at least 5 hours, and it was an 8-hour drive out there. And we funded that oddly through, we had built a lot of graphic design around our feature film in terms of a logo, and a company wanted to use it for South by Southwest for an event, take our name off it and put there, because there was a lot of Western, Southwest looking stuff. Wrote us a nice license fee check for that, and we were like, well, that's a short film. And we funded a small portion with equity from our feature film, because it was considered a development exercise. So that's how we put our film together.
Well, we shot with a semi-professional Sony with a very small body, because we had to get into India without official filming permission, because it's very difficult. Since Slumdog Millionaire, they are really aware of, they don't want to, they don't want to be filmed. They don't want their poverty being so exposed, and so it's really difficult negotiations, and they tend to stop shooting. So we wanted to avoid that and get in there as tourists. So that fortunately worked well. What else? I mean, about the funding, as I said, it was like we have this TV channel with that special short slot. So that was basically, I wrote a script, a treatment, and then they greenlighted it. So, but in Germany, it's like we have many film fundings there and different TV stations. So it's like always you try different approaches to get things done. Sometimes it's you start over on your own, and then you try to, I start shooting something and then show it to get some more funding. Depends. But this was like one TV channel, one decision, and that's always nice. It's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, they. Be careful, because the people that don't ask them speak company know general dynamics. Okay. Actually, I don't know that much about the American way of film funding and about supporting the arts. I learned about it because I have an American producer now for another film, so I'm really curious about that. But in Germany, it's like we have like very many official like state fundings. So it's and state support. So it's not that much. I think the main difference is that it's not that much. You try to write and then you apply for funding, and it's not that you like ruin your credit cards and ruin your existence to make a film, and then it's not that big of a risk. So sometimes I miss the drive of the risk and the stakes, and I feel like, I mean, your stories, it's really you give it all and you bring everything in it, and on the other hand, we have kind of maybe more opportunities to try, and I enjoy that.
Camera and how you fund it.
We shot on the Red Epic with an anamorphic lens. It was like a 50 millimeter one lens for the film. I funded via my credit card. Yeah, like Sally Mae, I think, ultimately owns me for a long time. So yeah, that funded it. And then, yeah, we sold the film, and so that's helped to pay for, you know, the travel and all that stuff. And so.
Maybe I'd like to add one more thing. I think this funding system is one of the reasons that we have some problems with the German film as well, because it's like they don't really care about the you know, the quality and the audience too much. It's like it doesn't matter if you have an audience of 10,000 Germans watching your art house film, because it's not your money. So if you put your own money and your own stakes in it, you really strive for it and go for it, that it's out there and that everybody sees it, and then you try to, maybe you try to give more and try to be more honest and so that's we have many art house films, too many art house films in Germany that nobody knows. So that's kind of our problem.
Do we still have time for one more? Okay. Great. One more. General question about casting.
So with a short time frame, we wrote the script in November and shot it early December. And so we were working on an accelerated timeline to pull together the cast. But when you have just two people in the desert in front of a camera, that's what we're watching. It has to work. And the kid, there's a teenage role for a Latino kid who plays a drug mule, who was locked in a water heater. I don't know if you saw the short, but was pretty certain that I was looking for a non-actor, or at least a first-time actor, because I find that unless you just have a true gift of a talent, if a kid has come up through the system and had done a lot of professional acting, they tend to almost become a little too self-aware. And I was looking for someone who grew up in a community that was contending with some of the issues of the film. And, you know, he was never a drug mule, has a good family, but, you know, his father's been deported twice and going through immigration courts. And so, you know, there's something simmering there that they can access on their subconscious. And we auditioned, I think, 30 kids from just local schools around Austin. And the moment Cesar was the young actor, he walked in the room, and actually I knew when he shook my hand that I wanted to cast him. And then the other actor was the Border Patrol agent. He was more established. I had worked with him before, and I'd always kind of saw him as this guy in writing the short. So that was an easy decision. But who was going to play off of him was the real challenge. And actually, the semifinalists, there were two that got down to the wire out of all those kids. This guy was an 8th grader, had already been in gangs, been in juvie, been in and out of the system, and just had this, kind of renewed purpose and like had lived everything that this character was going to go through. But I went with the one who hadn't, primarily because of his handshake and just what you saw through his eyes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much for participating. Thanks everyone for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the festival.